Yeah, absolutely. Just like the disconnect between like physical interactions between people is being separated because of social media, and just like everything depends on social media. Everybody's lifestyles is being changed, and it is, yeah, it's affecting the youth. And
Yeah. And it's really causing so much anxiety and so much depression, and it's sad. And the kids nowadays, their self-worths are just, it's, someone will say something, and if we would start to teach, children and teenagers, and it really has to start, a lot of it has to start in the home or whatever. And that's what I try to, coach other moms on, or whatever I do. My coaching is called CEO Moms. And if we would try to teach the kids that when someone says something bad about you, it actually has nothing to do with me, right? It's actually a reflection of them. So it's no different than if you sit there and you think, okay, if you judge somebody, there's something that's triggering you, that you're judging them. That has to do everything with you, and it has nothing to do with them. But the problem is that most people really don't either see that in themselves, or they don't want to take the time to really dig deep in themselves. So I try to teach even my children. I try to say, look at, like, someone says, I mean, my son say he's not a good basketball player, and they're like, oh, Jackson, you suck or whatever, right? And he'll come home and he'll be all upset, and I'm like, that actually has nothing to do with you, right? These kids are, because Jackson did a really good play and he did get a 3-point whatever. I'm like, there's a jealousy, there's a something, and rather than get mad at these people, or rather than bite back or whatever, just think, you know what, like, okay, that's your opinion. Actually, I feel bad for people that have to constantly judge other people, because there's something inside of them that's causing them to do that, right? There's a deeper, right? So if we look at it from a different perspective, rather than, being ignorant back or biting back and fighting with people, if we just sit back and be like, okay, you know what, that's the capacity they have, that's the mindset they have right now, it has nothing to do with me. I'm going to continue to live my life and be positive, and as long as I'm doing the best I can, I'm not hurting anybody or whatever, I don't need to worry about what anybody else thinks at this point, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about CEO Moms. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I a coaching program, and what it is it's a 7-week program, but it's with specific moms, you can do kind of a maintenance, and what it is we just dive really deep into, first we look at our own self-worth, because everything starts with us in the home, how we talk to our children, how we, how our habits, because they literally watch what we do. Sometimes we don't think they do, but then next thing you know, you see something, you're like, oh, they're doing the same thing I did or whatever. And so we just really start with us. Then it goes into, relationships with your significant other, relationships with your children, parenting, fitness is a big part of it. So it goes through a bunch of, 7 different modules, and we dive deep into that. And there's a lot of realization that comes out in, within these moms, because a lot of times as we become mothers, we really lose ourselves, right? So we have children, they come first, and who comes last? Us. And if we do anything for ourselves, there's this unspoken thing that you should feel guilty, or you're a selfish mom, or what. And that even took me a long time. And what we do is we're constantly catering, and we're constantly trying to hold emotional capacity for our spouses, for our kids, and everything else, while inside we're basically dying. And I'll tell you a story. My son that's older, he's 23 now, Parker. It wasn't until I think he was like 19, and I had a big breakthrough in my life, because I had some past trials that were pretty damaging to me. And I continued to just go through life, and I put on the show, and that's what I learned. I learned to you just push through, and everything's good. You show no weakness. And it was funny, because when I had this heart to heart with him and his dad and everything else, he said to me, he said, Mom, he says, I always knew you were hurting inside. He said, because you were just too perfect. I was like, what? Like, as a boy, he knew, growing up, there was no way that mom, like, so he always knew that there was something, everything had to be so perfect. I had to be perfect in front of everybody. I had to have this I mean, I'm a very outgoing, happy person. I believe myself to be, but there was always, I would never let myself get down or show any weakness. And so that was what he learned throughout his life, that we couldn't really be honest with ourselves or honest with others, because we just everything had to be okay. There's no weakness, right? So as much as I thought by being this, so-called, perfect mother and catering to my kids and everything else and showing no weakness, I thought I was doing them good. But at the end of the day, he's 19 years old and he's like, no, Mom, I always knew you were hurting inside. And I mean, you're just shocked, right? We don't realize.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, sorry. So like you were saying, like a positive mindset is something that we can all achieve and work on. So how does having a positive mindset make a difference in having a bad mindset?
So being, and it's hard. Constantly we hear all these cliches. Oh, just be positive. Oh, just think positive. And it's hard times. Like the reality is there's days where it is so hard. But if rather than tell ourselves, okay, be positive every day, we stop and, a lot of times in the morning, I'll sit down and I'll just sit and I'll reflect. So I'll drop my kids off at school and I'll drive to the gym. And if it's a good day or a bad day, and I'll just kind of sit there and reflect, and I'll be like, okay, what am I grateful for? Because if I think of all of the things that maybe had gone wrong the day before, or even just that morning, I'm not going to have a positive mindset, right? I can't possibly have a positive mindset. And so if we incorporate little habits to find a way to have a positive mindset, rather than, we read these self-help books, we listen to these coaches and all this, and it's rah, rah, rah. We get super hyped up and we're good for a little while. And then all of a sudden we fall and we don't understand. We're like, well, I'm just feel so negative all the time, or I'm depressed or whatever. And the problem is we're not learning the little habits that are going to create the positive mindset, because you can't possibly always have that. That's just not reality. Right. And I, nothing against what people teach, but I truly believe that people that tell you that, they must be from another planet, because I'm like, it is not mentally possible to never be negative. But if we stop and think of how do we feel when we have that positive mindset? Okay, so if I'm negative, my whole day goes to heck, and I affect everybody else around me. So what happens? My husband maybe turns a little bit cranky. My kids are cranky because they're feeling my negative energy. So instead I sit down and I reflect, okay, what am I grateful for? It could simply just be that I woke up that morning, right? Like whatever it is, there's so much happiness in gratitude, rather than a lot of times we focus on what we don't have, or what we're not doing, or what we're not doing good enough, rather than, what, I'm actually grateful I got up and I put on some workout clothes, and, or whatever. It could be very, very simple, but creating those little habits is what's going to give you that positive mindset, because you can't just possibly wake up and be happy every day. There's, so I think those habits, and I think a lot of times we're told to just stop being negative, be positive, and everything will be all happy go lucky, whatever, rather than just talking like that. I think, no, what are the daily habits, whether it be something 5 minutes a day that you create, and it becomes a habit. Then maybe a week or two later, you tap on another little habit. So what are those habits that are going to create that positive mindset for you? So you can